Hello, I'm Blair Kaneshiro, and I'll be presenting Diversity in Music Technology, Initiatives and Insights from Music Information Retrieval. I'd like to thank the ADC 23 organizers for inviting me to give this talk and for the opportunity to speak with you today. In terms of the scope of my talk, there are a few perspectives through which one can approach diversity and inclusion. For instance, there's scholarship and published research. There's also community organizing, as well as lived experience. I approach diversity and inclusion through community organizing, as well as my lived experience. For today's talk, I'll be focusing primarily on the community organizing aspect. In particular, I'll be focusing on diversity initiatives that are organized in the Music Information Retrieval, or MIR community. This includes the society itself, the International Society for Music Information Retrieval, or ISMIR. It includes initiatives that are organized through the annual ISMIR conference, and it includes initiatives organized through Women in Music Information Retrieval, or WiMIR. In my talk, I'll be walking you through some of our initiatives, what they are, and what they're intended to accomplish. I'll also provide some insights for those of you who are interested in organizing in your own communities. Before I jump into these initiatives, I thought it might be helpful to provide some context on where I'm coming from and how I relate to diversity and inclusion in MIR. In my research, I'm working primarily in the fields of neuroscience and music. This includes studies involving human-centered music information retrieval, often with a focus on musical engagement. I consider music information retrieval to be my home research community. In my own lived experience, through my gender, my ethnic background, and being a first-gen low-income college student, I've experienced firsthand what it's like to be underrepresented in MIR and in STEM more broadly. I've done a fair amount of community organizing around this topic, promoting DEI in both research communities like ISMIR, as well as in academic and university settings. I've been active with WiMIR for going on 8 years now. I've organized in various initiatives that include conference committees, as well as being on the founding teams of both the WiMIR mentoring program and the WiMIR workshop. I also take a leadership role in the MIR community more broadly. I've served on the ISMIR board since 2018, and I'm also one of the general chairs of next year's ISMIR conference. So let's talk about music information retrieval. MIR is an interdisciplinary field that's approaching topics such as retrieving information from music, characterizing music, building applications around music, and improving user experiences with music services. Those who are active in the field come from a variety of backgrounds themselves. This can range from foundational audio DSP and machine learning, but can also include fields such as psychology, musicology, information and library science, and even business and law. The MIR community has been around for over 20 years now. The society itself of ISMIR incorporated in 2008 and now has an elected board. MIR has two primary publication venues. One is the proceedings of the annual ISMIR conference. There's also the Transactions of ISMIR, or TISMIR journal. And as you can see from this map here, the ISMIR conference moves around from year to year, hosted in various locations, primarily in the global north. Like many STEM fields, MIR faces a diversity issue. But first, you might be asking yourself, why is this even important? Why is diversity, equity, and inclusion important? There are several perspectives through which you could answer this question. I can give a couple here. One is that diversity enhances innovation. There have been a number of studies and articles, such as the one shown here, that report that teams that are more diverse increase innovation in their output. For instance, in a product setting, a more diverse team may design products that better serve the needs of a diverse set of end users. However, one could argue that innovation and output should not be needed to justify promoting a diverse and inclusive community. In fact, it's just the right thing to do. And no one should be excluded from participating in a community or a field because of who they are, where they're from, or how much money they have. You may also be wondering what some metrics for success are, and I can share some that we've considered in MIR. For instance, you might ask who identifies as part of your community and who feels like they belong. You could ask who has access to your community. This could include things like who is able to attend your conferences and other events, but who has access to members of your community as well for networking and information exchange. To take it a step further, you could ask yourself who is able to contribute to the research of your community, who is actually involved in moving your field forward. And finally, you could look not only at who is present in your community at a given point in time, but who is there for the long term, who is able to advance and progress their career, and who remains over periods of several years. In MIR, there's been some amount of research and a lot of information collection around this topic. For example, in this 2016 ISMIR paper led by Professor Xiao Hu, the authors performed an infometric study on the presence of women authors in ISMIR papers published from 2000 to 2015. Among the findings of the paper, the authors report that only around 14% of research papers published in ISMIR in this time period were led by female researchers. In addition, while they saw an increase in female authorship in the years leading up to this paper, that increase was primarily in supporting co-author roles and not in the leadership role. We can also track the presence of women at the ISMIR conference. As shown here, this is from ISMIR 2016, we can see that women are fairly well represented, for instance, in the organizational committee, as well as invited roles, such as keynote speakers and panelists, and on the ISMIR board. However, women are underrepresented among the attendees and authors. A more recent report from ISMIR 2020, which was the first fully virtual ISMIR conference, we see here that women are again fairly well represented as organizers and keynotes. However, women authors and attendees are still markedly lower than men. Therefore, in MIR, we do know that we have some work to do in this area. And this brings me to Women in Music Information Retrieval, or WiMIR. WiMIR is a sub-community within the MIR community who is dedicated to promoting the role of and increasing opportunities for women in the field. Organizationally, WiMIR is a little bit different from ISMIR. So unlike ISMIR, WiMIR is not incorporated into a formal organization, and there is no elected board or official leadership of WiMIR. Instead, WiMIR initiatives are typically founded from the ground up. So interested MIR communities will come together to propose and launch new initiatives, often seeking advisement from organizers of existing WiMIR initiatives, as well as the ISMIR board. I can give you some historical highlights of WiMIR. So WiMIR first formed as an informal meetup group during the ISMIR conference in 2011. These informal meetups continued annually at the conference until 2015, when WiMIR for the first time received a dedicated plenary session in the full program of the single-track ISMIR conference. In 2016, the ISMIR organizing committee of the conference expanded to include for the first time one or more chairs who were dedicated specifically to WiMIR. Also in 2016, the WiMIR mentoring program launched for the first time, and this was also the first year that we saw industry sponsors who were contributing funds specifically to help women attend the conference. In 2017, this sponsorship began to formalize, ultimately reaching a separate track of sponsorship that continues today. The WiMIR workshop launched in 2018, and in 2020, during the virtual ISMIR conference, we saw new special sessions that were related to ISMIR or to WiMIR, as well as the launch of the WiMIR editorial team. Finally, in 2021, we saw for the first time the WiMIR chairs of the ISMIR conference broaden in scope to DEI. So the first set of initiatives I'd like to tell you about have to do with WiMIR and DEI at ISMIR conferences. The aims of this initiative are threefold. First, to facilitate access to the conference, typically through registration and travel grants. To provide structured opportunities for networking and information exchange with other attendees, as well as helping new researchers enter the field through late-breaking or full publications. As mentioned on the previous slide, there are a number of activities that involve the WiMIR or DEI chairs, including the plenary session, presence on the organizing team, sponsorship, which has achieved formalized sponsorship tiers. In certain conferences, there have also been receptions, luncheons, or other events, providing a structured place for attendees to meet each other. Finally, in 2020 and 2021, we saw special sessions that were programmed into the conference that were, for instance, opportunities to interact with notable women working in the field, as well as topic-themed DEI panels. In addition to these initiatives, there are others that are organized within WiMIR, but more broadly across the conference organizers. For instance, the transition to online conferences, which occurred out of necessity in 2020, has continued today through a hybrid conference option. This increases access to the conference, particularly for those who cannot attend in person. In addition, since 2020, the conference has offered childcare grants. This provides financial support to those with caretaking responsibilities, which can facilitate their access to the conference as well. In 2021, we saw initiatives that were specifically for newcomers, which provided a structured social group as well as access to a more seasoned community member to interact with during the conference. In 2021 and 2022, the scientific program chairs organized special call for papers that were related to cultural diversity in MIR. Finally, we're also seeing this new author mentorship. In 2021, the late-breaking demo chairs provided mentorship to those who were submitting for the first time. And since 2022, there has been a mentorship structure for new authors to receive feedback from experienced researchers before entering the peer review process. The next initiative I'd like to tell you about is the WiMIR mentoring program. At its launch, the mentoring program was intended to provide women of any career stage in MIR access to a mentor who could be a woman or an ally that they could meet with over a period of months to discuss topics of their choosing. The mentoring program launched in 2016 and was fully remote from the start, meaning that anyone could participate, regardless of where they were based. In terms of eligibility, the WiMIR mentoring program was initially geared toward women, but over the years has expanded in scope such that anyone who identifies as underrepresented can request to be paired with a mentor. Mentees can be from any career stage, and in fact, we've seen people in the program ranging from high schoolers all the way to tenured faculty who are seeking to be paired with a mentor. Mentors can be any gender. We only ask that they be more senior than the mentee they are paired with. So WiMIR program mentors are typically graduate students and more advanced. In terms of enrollment, in the first launch of the program in 2016, we had over 20 mentor-mentee pairs. Over time, this has expanded to over 60 mentor-mentee pairs in last year's round, meaning that we have over 100 participants in a given round. The topics that people discuss in this program are determined by the mentee, although we do offer some topics which help us match the pairs. For instance, some mentees may be seeking practical or career advice, for instance, on applying to graduate school or pursuing a career in academia or industry, or trying to decide between one or the other. Some mentees actually request technical mentorship and wish to actively collaborate with their mentor. And in this case, it's important to match people on the basis of their research interests. Finally, some mentees are seeking broader advice, for instance, how to achieve work-life balance, how to balance their career with children, or how to deal with sexism in the workplace. The next initiative I'd like to talk about is the WiMIR workshop. This is an annual event. Specifically, it's a satellite event of the main ISMIR conference. Like many of our initiatives, goals of the workshop include providing venues for mentorship, networking, and collaboration. But the format of the workshop is very specifically designed to complement the large group setting of the main ISMIR conference, as well as the one-on-one interactions that people might get through mentorship. In particular, the workshop operates under what we now call a project guide model. And what this entails is we invite senior members from the community to propose a topic. And then at the workshop participants spend the day working with their project guide in small groups to brainstorm and prototype the topic of the leader's choosing. This model is a fairly radical departure from the typical workshop format, which might typically involve things like talks or posters or perhaps a panel discussion. In particular, we're shifting the focus from dissemination of completed research to collaborative work on new research, which might continue through the conference and perhaps beyond. In addition, the networking and mentorship structure is different. So instead of hearing from people as they present their research, the participants are actually getting to have close interaction for the whole day with their project guide as well as their teammates. Finally, the WiMIR workshop is always a free event, and we open it to all members of the community, not just women. The workshop launched in 2018. We had 2 years of in-person workshops before transitioning to a virtual format in 2020. The workshop is in hiatus this year, but we look forward to its return in 2024. Finally, I'd like to tell you about the WiMIR editorial team. The objectives of this team are primarily to maintain the WiMIR blog. The editorial team manages contributions from the community and also makes their own contributions to have a set of information about WiMIR that are presented to the community in a meaningful way. In terms of timeline, the blog was initiated in 2016, which coincided with the launch of the WiMIR mentoring program. Since then, community members could contribute content whenever they felt like doing so. And in 2020, the structure of the editorial team formalized to a team of students who were brought together specifically to manage the contributions and create their own content. As you can see here on the left, there are a variety of topics that people write about on the WiMIR blog. This can range from announcements and summaries of WiMIR initiatives, such as the mentoring program and the workshop. There are also features on women in the field, so someone could choose to interview someone, or someone could write about their own experiences working in the field. We also have a number of blog posts that reflect on the topics that I showed related to the mentorship program and to diversity and inclusion more broadly. Finally, the editorial team handles cross-posting with other WiMIR and ISMIR channels. So this could include WiMIR social media channels, as well as ISMIR conferences that choose to host their own blog. So those are the set of initiatives, but I also need to talk about a crucial aspect of the MIR community that helps these initiatives exist. And this is the role of allies. So every community will be different, and it's always helpful to see what the tone is in your community about allies. So by this, I mean people who aren't necessarily underrepresented themselves, but who might form the majority of your community. For instance, does your community have a spirit of recognition and support? Or does your community have a sense of indifference or perhaps even hostility or resistance to diversity and inclusion initiatives? In MIR, we're very lucky to have strong sense of allyship from the community at large. And this allyship has come through in a number of different ways. One way is through active volunteering. So this refers to people who sign up to be mentors, for instance, or who volunteer their time to be a project guide in the WiMIR workshop. If you look at the organizing committees of the WiMIR initiatives, in fact, a lot of the organization is handled by allies. You can also see presence of allyship in the other leadership and other committees that support WiMIR initiatives. And this includes, for instance, the broader ISMIR conference organizing teams, as well as the ISMIR board. Allyship can also be shown through sponsorship, and WiMIR has benefited quite a lot from the number of companies who have contributed sponsorship funds specifically to support women and other underrepresented researchers. Finally, allyship does not always need to involve active volunteering or contribution of funds. It can also be shown through showing up and contributing to the community culture. For instance, we see broad representation of the ISMIR community attending the WiMIR plenary sessions, or participating in the WiMIR workshop, or simply being present and willing to talk with new community members and welcoming them in. Because of the strong allyship of the MIR community, WiMIR initiatives have benefited in part by having the work of organizing these initiatives not loaded only onto those who are underrepresented and already working in the community. And this has made it vastly easier to host so many initiatives and for these initiatives to carry on over time. So on behalf of the WiMIR organizers, I want to extend a huge thank you to all of the allies in the MIR community, however you're supporting and showing up for others. So in all, WiMIR and MIR more broadly is seeking to offer a set of mutually supporting activities that collectively promote diversity and inclusion. As you can see here, all of these initiatives promote access in some way, and this can include access to the ISMIR conference itself, but also access to the community and members of the community. Our sponsorship and grant structure provides financial support. A number of these initiatives directly provide venues for knowledge exchange. Some initiatives provide opportunities for technical and career mentorship. Many provide opportunities for networking. And importantly, a number of these opportunities promote visibility of women and other underrepresented community members. And in doing so, promotes role models that others might see and might help others who are in the community, or perhaps not even yet in the community, envision a future for themselves in MIR. These activities are mutually supporting in that some can bring about others. For instance, receiving financial support to attend the conference promotes access, but also enables opportunities for networking and seeing role models. As another example, providing technical mentorship might gain someone a foothold in the field as an author, thereby providing them access to the conference. In all, through these initiatives, we hope to instill a sense of belonging for women and other underrepresented researchers. We hope to help those who are seeking to contribute research to the community to do so. And ultimately, we are aiming to help people achieve long-term career paths in music information retrieval. Looking ahead, we have other things going on as well. There are always conversations going on at a high level on what we're trying to accomplish as a community. For example, in 2021, my DEI co-chair Jordan Smith and I hosted an ISMIR Diversity Summit. This event brought together organizers from WiMIR, from the ISMIR conference, also from the ISMIR board, as well as our neighboring community of NIME, to discuss a variety of topics ranging from the high-level diversity and inclusion goals of the society to the structure of WiMIR, and other topics around accessibility and ethical considerations. It's also been very exciting to see some diversity and inclusion initiatives that are hosted outside of WiMIR. For example, the student member of the ISMIR board, Alia Morsi, has initiated a new effort centered around MIR in Africa. Over the past couple of years, this team has connected with communities in Africa and presented at a number of technical and machine learning conferences. This form of outreach is very exciting because it's taking a new perspective on diversity and inclusion in MIR, specifically one of geography and engaging with the global South. So we can shift gears now to talk about some insights. And I have 4 insights for you today. The first insight is that you need to understand your community. So I've been talking about what we've been doing in MIR. This is shaped by what we see going on in MIR and also the affordances that the MIR community offers. Your community might be a little bit different. So for instance, you can ask yourself, what does more diversity mean for you and for your community? One way to do this is to assess your demographics. You can see who is underrepresented or underserved. You can also see who is missing altogether and try to understand why that is the case. Another aspect of understanding your community is to identify what is needed. And this can vary from case to case. For instance, it might be a matter of money and seeking more sponsorship to enable people to attend your conference. It might be more about outreach and raising information or raising awareness about your community to those who might not know about it yet. Or you might identify a need for mentorship and those deeper connections between people who are newer to your community and those who are more established. You also want to assess what the general climate is of your community. So as I mentioned earlier, some communities will be very open and welcoming. Some might be less so. That shouldn't prevent you from organizing, but it will influence how you might set up your initiatives. So you can get a sense of who is there to help you. Do you design programs that are reliant on a lot of community engagement, or do you streamline your initiatives? A related question is, do you open up your events to the entire community? Or would it be better for the people you are trying to serve to maybe streamline your events, but specifically for them? And this step, I would say, requires a willingness to really listen to people who might be less represented. Those of us who are organizing from already having been established in the field need to recognize that a lot of us are coming from a position of privilege. Therefore, we really need to embrace empathy, listen to others, give them room to share and contribute their perspectives and experience, and give them opportunities to lead. My second insight has to do with a launch, feedback, and iteration cycle. So when launching a new initiative, there may be a lot of excitement and perhaps a desire to tackle every aspect of your diversity and inclusion goals. There may also be a desire to design the perfect program right out of the gate. In fact, you don't need to do this, and it's probably not even possible. Keeping that in mind, I want to point out that you cannot fully predict, no matter how much research and planning and need finding you do, how an initiative will go once it's actually launched. And one example that I can share about this is when we first launched the WiMIR mentoring program, we were worried that we would have too many mentees and not enough mentors, and that we wouldn't be able to match every person seeking mentorship with a mentor. In fact, it turned out to be the opposite case, where we had such an overflow of support from the allies in the community that we had too many mentors who signed up, and in the end, we did not have enough mentees to match them with. So from this, it was a surprise to us, but we learned from this, and we learned that our recruiting efforts might be better positioned toward outreach and bringing in these new and potentially new community members and match them with a pool of mentors that we knew would always be robust. Along similar lines, you want to plan well but be open to change. So, planning well could involve, for instance, having a very intentional founding team. So, this could be a set of people who work well together and who are aligned on the aims, but might have diverse insights into how to set up this initiative for the first time. A piece of advice that I've heard over the years is to avoid analysis paralysis. So, when planning an initiative for the first time, there will probably be ample opportunity for endless discussion and speculation. But in practice, it's often better to get something into a good enough stage and launch it and iterate from there. It's critically important to collect feedback for every initiative and learn from it. Some advice I've gotten here is that if you host an event and don't collect feedback, it's as if that event never happened. And I can speak from experience that it's been extremely helpful to get feedback from people. One example of this is the WiMIR workshop. When we hosted the first fully virtual workshop in 2020, as you can see on the slide, we thought that it would be most accessible if we scheduled every workshop on a Saturday because we thought that people would be free to attend the events. When we collected feedback afterwards, we found that some people did like the Saturday events, but for other people, for instance, people with small children, it was prohibitive for them to attend because it was on the weekend and they had other commitments. So this was surprising to us, but we learned from this feedback. And in the following year, for 2021, we devised a more flexible schedule that included weekday events. Finally, you need to keep in mind that if your initiative is successful, it's going to change the community. And therefore, the community and the needs of your participants will likely change over time. Therefore, in your planning, it's good to have some solid goals for the near term, but be ready to pivot and maybe adjust your initiative depending on how your community is changing. My third insight is to understand your organizational model and be intentional about it. Over the years, the topic of whether WiMIR should formalize as an organization comes up again and again. And this advice that I got from my colleague, Professor Catherine Kinnaird, is that the goal of WiMIR should be not to exist. This is a pretty provocative statement, but I would say that what it's really pointing to is that if WiMIR is truly successful, the diversity and inclusion aims of MIR will become ingrained in the larger community, and WiMIR would thus not be needed as the organizing entity. To this end, when you're getting up and running, it's helpful to determine whether you want to put effort into formalizing your organization. On the one hand, if you do decide to formalize, it will greatly clarify your organizational structure and it will make very clear who is involved and in what capacity. Also, if you need to receive or disperse funds, such as receive sponsorship funds or give out grants, formally organizing can help with that. The drawback to this is that it will introduce a substantial overhead to set up this organization and maintain it. On the other hand, if you choose to go with a more ad hoc structure, which is what WiMIR does, you will have more agility and maybe an ability to try things out and for committees to form from the ground up at varying levels of involvement and commitment. However, there are limitations to this model as well. For instance, WiMIR cannot receive funds ourselves. So when there is sponsorship or grant mechanisms, we rely on other entities, such as the ISMIR conference or the ISMIR board, to handle these transactions. In addition, the lack of a formal structure can generate some confusion about who is in charge, about who is doing what, and from whom you need to seek approval if you're launching something new. Finally, my last insight is to plan for success, but also work on your succession planning. What this means is that if someone is founding an initiative, they should not be beholden to organizing it forever. And there are several reasons for this. First, you'll likely find that your initial founding team at some point will want to move on to other activities. The initiative itself will also benefit from an influx of fresh ideas over time. And finally, the broader community will always benefit from new leadership. And bringing newer community members into leadership positions in these established initiatives is a great place for them to cultivate their leadership skills. Therefore, I would suggest discussing succession plans at the start. This doesn't need to be extensive since you're also trying to launch the initiative itself, but you could, for instance, talk about what the timeline and evolution of your organizer roles might be. For instance, with the WiMIR workshop, we arrived at a structure where new organizers might be asked to commit to 2 years of active organizing and potentially a third year in an advisory capacity. It's also helpful to keep a record of what is most essential to your initiative so that you can pass that on to your future organizers. Within a founding team, it might be very clear and obvious what the main goals and activities are of your initiative. But when new organizers come in, it can sometimes be opaque or unclear what is incidental to your initiative and easy to change, and what is essential and what should continue over the years. Finally, it's helpful to devise a mechanism for identifying new organizers. For instance, will you identify and invite specific individuals, or will you have an open call? And this kind of thing can also evolve and change over the years. So, in addition to those 4 insights, I also have a bonus insight, which is that you can always learn from others. So, there might be feelings sometimes that you need to start from nothing, but it's always good to see whether you can avoid reinventing the wheel and look to your neighboring communities to learn about their best practices. For instance, with WiMIR, we learned quite a lot from looking at WIML, which was already a mature organization. We were getting up and running. We've also drawn inspiration from widening NLP for their broader view of diversity and inclusion. We're very impressed with what's going on in the NIME community and their diversity arm, which includes focus on different aspects of diversity, including geographical diversity and support for authors who do not publish primarily in English. The Society for Music Perception and Cognition has also been doing quite a lot of work with their anti-racism and equity efforts. And finally, ADC is also starting up a mentorship program, and we're very excited to see how this evolves and grows over time, and we're sure we'll be learning a lot from you as well. So this brings me to the conclusion of my talk. Today, I've talked to you about a set of initiatives that have stemmed from MIR's diversity challenges. A number of these initiatives have been organized largely through Women in Music Information Retrieval. Our initiatives have changed and expanded over time and have been successful in large part due to this supportive ecosystem that includes the participants, the organizers, the sponsors, and the broad allyship of the larger community. Finally, it's exciting to see newer community members taking on these leadership roles, moving these initiatives forward, and also coming up with new initiatives. So I've reached the end of my talk, but I cannot conclude my talk without thanking all of the people and all of the organizers who have made these initiatives possible over the years. So I'll start by thanking the WiMIR and DEI chairs who have operated as part of the ISMIR conference organizing committees since 2016. These organizers have undertaken a lot of effort to make sure that every ISMIR conference provides a welcoming, supportive environment for those who may be less represented. I also need to acknowledge all of the other initiatives that are organized through the ISMIR conference that might fall outside of the scope of the WiMIR DEI organizers, but contribute to that holistic, welcoming, and supportive environment. And this can range from the mentorship mechanisms to the online and now hybrid attendance options. Also includes those who volunteer their time as featured speakers, as panelists, and the committees that have organized around the grants, sponsorship, the volunteers, and the general chairs. I need to thank all of the organizers of the WiMIR mentoring program over the years who have taken this program from an idea to a first launch to what is now, I would say, a mature program that should continue for many years to come. I also want to thank all of the student volunteers who helped with the operations and communications of the mentoring program, as well as everyone who has signed up over the years as a mentor or a mentee. I want to thank the organizers of the WiMIR workshop who came together to provide this truly complementary offering to the existing WiMIR initiatives. The workshop organizers have weathered the evolution of the workshop from an in-person event to a virtual format and has been made successful through the efforts of a number of volunteers as well. I want to thank all of the project guides who volunteered their time and expertise, as well as the participants who were actively engaged in the workshop. I also want to thank the workshop sponsors for our in-person years and look forward to the workshop's return in 2024. Finally, I want to thank the WiMIR editorial team who came together to formalize and add structure to this communication mechanism for WiMIR. These students have been contributing not only structure but content to the blog. I also want to thank all of the other contributors who have written blog posts for WiMIR over the years. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, the initiatives of WiMIR would not have been possible without the broad support of the MIR community, as well as support and oversight from the ISMIR board. And in conclusion, I want to recognize the growing number of companies who over recent years have contributed sponsorship funds specifically to women and underrepresented researchers through the ISMIR conference. Your contributions have vastly improved access to the conference and hence the ISMIR community for underrepresented researchers. So I just want to say thank you to all the sponsors, and it was really exciting to see so many companies coming together on this slide. So that's the end of my talk. If you're interested in learning more, I highly recommend visiting wimir.wordpress.com, which is the WiMIR blog. And on there, you'll see a variety of content related to our initiatives, as well as the WiMIR community. Thank you.